Hey guys, how are you? A reset sniper coming straight at you. And I want to talk about a topic that gets a little bit of airplay, but generally is not being understood for the fullness and scale of damage that it's bringing to bear that will pull the overall financial system down with great aplomb in the not too distant future. What are we talking about? We're talking about the real subprime crisis, Mark II, student loans. That's right. United States, good old USA student loans. So a couple of things that a number of people need to understand. Right now, the total figure of student loans is $1.6 trillion. $1.6 trillion. This has been inflated and created in a record space of time. Now, just to put that in context, you've all heard by now my, count 1 second a day, a second, count one number a second. How long does it take you to count to 1 million? How long does it take you to count to 1 billion? How long does it take you to count to 1 trillion? If you haven't, the answer is 1 million will take you about 12.5 days. You'll be 32 years counting to 1 billion. If you counted one number every second of your life, no eating, no sleeping, no anything, just counting, and you'd be 32,000 years to count to a single trillion. Well, let's give you another benchmark for the scale of that student loan size and the problem it poses. The outstanding high-risk mortgages, in other words, the subprime, the junk, the liar loans, and all the stuff that was the problem that went bad in 07, 08, was 1 trillion. That's right. The high-risk mortgages portfolio book is 1 trillion. You're talking about something that is over 50% larger, going on 60% larger, and still growing, heading for 70% larger than the entire junk mortgage pile that created the last financial crisis. Hear that again and let it sink in. 60% larger and still growing, and larger than all the bad high-risk, high-yield mortgages that were created in by 07, 08. Okay, let that sink in and recognize that it's growing on an ongoing basis throughout 2020. Now, let's talk about arrears. What was the arrears on mortgages? On all mortgages, that's good, bad, ugly, everything in America, everyone who had a mortgage throughout 2007, 08. It was 5%. So 5% on all mortgages, not just the high yields. If you took everybody who owned money to a bank, you had a 5% arrears. At the height, it was the worst ever. That's this historical high, yet it was manageable. 95% of people were still largely in shape for their mortgages at that time, but there wouldn't have been the high yield component of that. Student loan default rates are in excess of 15% currently and growing rapidly. So let's just cut that again. So you've got 1.6 trillion growing to 1.7 trillion through into 2020 and beyond, 1.75, 1.8, etc., etc. I mean, literally every student is coming out owing 100 grand for becoming a master's in basket weaving, and is going to earn the minimum wage with their amazing qualification that these student colleges are ripping their face off, plus all the living costs, etc., etc., rolled up. Anyway, the default rate is three times that it was on all mortgages. Now, all mortgages would have been a very, very big number. We were saying 1 trillion was the high yield mortgages, but nonetheless, you've got 15% on student loans is the current default rate. And more importantly, it's going up and it's increasing. So the amount of it is getting bigger and the rate of default is climbing. And it's already 3 times that on all mortgages that existed at the worst moment in our economic history in the States in 07, 08. Why are the default rates on student loans so much higher than they are on mortgages? Well, apart from the fact that people do the last thing The last thing they stop paying is their home, because they want to keep their home until the very last. It's very disruptive having to move and leave and carry on and change your life and all of that. Student loans, you've consumed the product. You've got your learning. They can't take the learning back. You know how to basket weave now or do some low-level web design work. They can't repossess anything in essence. Also, most importantly, the clients for student loans are generally kids, squeenies, millennials, in qualified schools, regardless of income, assets or credit history. People are being given loans. So you could be anywhere. You could be in your late teens, you can early 20s. You've never done any financial planning. You've never had to run a budget. You've never had to pay your own expenses before. You're financially illiterate, and we all know the education system is designed to keep you there. So you won't have been taught anything in school, nor in that 100 grand alone that you've created by going to study. Neither there will you have learned anything further about how to balance a checkbook and run your personal finances. So regardless of income, assets or credit history, this is your loan book. You know, when by the time people are coming to buy properties, they've often had to save, get a deposit, show some maturity, looking after a baby. It's no longer a selfish world of getting fall down drunk every Friday and Saturday night. Many of these borrowers just lack basic financial literacy. And then what happens is they're taking on so much debt and it's disproportionate to their relative earnings prospects. We all know now that supposedly the job participation rate is absolutely dire. In fact, the participation levels are as low as they were in the 60s. And if you take males, because remember in the previous benchmark of comparison, men largely did the working and women stayed at home, it's as low as the depression levels, participation rate in the economy. These are people that have actually been removed from the stats, that have been looking for jobs for over 6 months and are no longer deemed unemployed looking for work because they've just been so bad at finding a job, or they haven't found what they've wanted. They're just taken out of the numbers. They fall into the non-participation statistics in the economy. So you've got awful stats, as low as I say is in the 60s, and if you focus on males, it's depression, the first depression, not the one we're currently in, that you would last have such participation rate. So now these guys are coming out degreed, and what's going to happen? They're going to battle, and they're barely going to earn, wait for it, minimum wage. And they've got 100 grand loan on it. Now, when you're on minimum wage, 100 grand loan is like being on average US salary of about 25, 30,000 a year and having $1 million, you know, or 500,000 at least to pay on a mortgage. It's crushingly big. It's crushingly big, and their prospects are weak. So the key thing about the student loan, how does it get into government, and how's it going to pull the whole wigwam down, along with so many other things? Remember, I'm not talking subprime cars or anything else here. This is just student loan debt that we're talking about and the repercussions of it. It impacts on the budget deficit because approximately, wait for it, this is government as last purveyor. This is socialism. This is free education essentially at a rip-off price where you loan everybody up to the hilt. You allow anybody and everybody to borrow so that they go in to debt. The government is behind 90% of all student loans. In other words, the US Treasury guarantees that money. So now you've got student loans that are being originated by banks and other specialist loan servicing companies that do not even have to care about the quality of credit. Where have we seen this before? Remember securitization in subprime loans. The guy who originated the loan didn't have to collect the money. He just packaged it up and sold it on to someone else and said, yeah, you now own this. Good luck with collecting your yield, which is the mortgage payments. Now, we know that when people don't have to collect the money, it's not their money they're lending out, and they get paid for originating a loan, and they're just moving it on and someone else is backstopping, that the quality goes down. Trust me, if you're thinking of lending your own money to a few mates, you know who will pay you back and who won't, and you're very judicious and not overly generous. If you get to lend out government's money, to your mates? Well, everybody gets a loan because you love to be popular with your mates. And that's kind of how it works. So here you have 90% of that 1.6 trillion is backed by government. So the government is the bag holder. Now, hold on. When you say government, US Treasury, who am I talking about? I'm talking about the US citizen. Government doesn't generate income. Your tax revenue is their income. You are the slave bitch. You are backing these loans. You are giving loans to brats to study basket weaving. To all my lovely young viewers, I'm only kidding. Many of them are awesome and you're going to go on to do amazing things. I use this for entertainment purposes only. You can call me an old codger if you like. So what's actually happening is improper loans are being granted, and they're not going to do well. And the person who's granting the loans doesn't have to bother about the quality. It's not their money at the end of the day in a de facto sense. So the Treasury guarantees are all off the books. These aren't occurring in your federal budget as loan or debt. So all these things, it's an off the book item. So the federal Treasury government that does its debt to GDP levels has no allowances for the fact that it's backstopping already bad loans that are escalating in percentage, escalating in amount and scale, and are continuing to be made, and more are being handed down and saying, sorry, that one's for your book. So what typically happens is when a student starts to fall in arrears, the lender calls them in, and a little bit of grace and chop and repackaging and new payment terms. They try all of that stuff, but if someone can't pay, usually this is an extend and pretend charade. So what actually happens? Oh, we shuffle a bit of paper, we try consult a little bit, we say we care for you, we want you, we want you to try be good on your loans. Maybe we can cut you some slack and extend the term period, reduce this, roll up some penalties for a second loan later on that kicks in. In other words, banks are already hitting the line with borrowers and they're demanding payment from the Treasury. So what's actually happening now is all these little seeking grace techniques have taken place. And what's going on is now the banks are saying, we've done all we can. This guy don't have no money. He don't have no earning prospects. He's going nowhere fast. He's got $100 grand mortgage, which is a bit like a kid who's managed to buy a Ferrari. And the income prospects, at least he could rent the car out. Most of these guys are going to be on the better part of minimum wage. So what do we have here? We have a set of circumstances where it becomes a political football. So let's talk about the political football. 2016, this was already being perceived as a major point of interest. Come and enjoy the view here with me. 2016, it was a major political football. So Bernie Sanders and yours truly, the chief female Satan, Hillary Clinton, decided, no, we'll cut. We started making promises. We'll cut deals. We'll give you some relief. We understand loan forgiveness, some free tuition for students, etc., etc. And so there's a lot of millennials all creaking under the debt. And so what happens is they hear about these Democrats making various promises of what they'll do, etc., etc. And they go, yay, we'll vote Democrat. Those that cared to take the spliff out of their mouth and not trundle off to Burning Man or whatever, and actually trundled over to actually cast a ballot, all relied on their mates, said, yeah, we should all be Democrat or whatever, I'm struggling under this debt. So they made promises only for them never to get in power. And what actually happened is the students are desperate, they're being squeezed, and they're saying, yeah, the Democrats are going to get in, yeah. So a lot of them stop paying because they think there's going to be relief coming. So all that happened with all these campaign promises is natural psychology. If you hear there's going to be a possibility of debt relief, and Hillary Clinton's making promises, and Bernie Sanders is trying to outdo her on the socialist plus promises, debt write-offs, etc., poor burdenment of our young generation, which may in fact be quite true, various forms of relief are all being discussed. What then happened? They stopped paying their loans. And of course, in anticipation of a Clinton victory, maybe first for a Sanders victory, later for a Clinton one, and a debt jubilee, they doubly pissed that Donald Trump gets in, who hadn't made those promises. And what actually happens is a wave of defaults suddenly hit. And that's already happened once, and it's coming. and you're going to see it on a bigger scale in 2020. So here comes the 2020 election. Good old Bernie's back in the run, old KFC, Colonel Sanders, whatever, minus the goatee, I don't know. He's back in the run again there. And some of the other usual suspects are kicking around, and they're all wanting to get the youth vote out. What are they going to do? The same bait and switch scam. Guys, we're going to bring relief. We know you're battling. We know you're battling. Promising money, promising money. How do they promise money? How do they promise? They try to seduce the young vote. The campuses are now extremely leftist the world over. It's not just a US thing. Make loads of promises hoping that they will come in and wipe the debt clean or give them new special terms. And what's going to happen is when they go arrears on their loans, their credit ratings take a hit. So now we want to talk about debt to GDP ratio. I've regularly referenced Reinhardt and Rogoff about debt to GDP. 60% is a key level, 90% is literally point of no return. The USA is well through 100%, 105, and going for 115 double quick time, with many things not included. So the lies, damn lies, and statistics in America are particularly high. I've just given you one example of backstopping all the student loan debt as many. There's also the welfare, Medicaid, all the boomers, they're on the wrong side of the demographic pig in the python. All the claimers now no longer paying tax, now claiming from the system, etc., etc. I mean, it just doesn't get, there's no sunbeams here. I'm sorry. This is misery porn. It's all gonna die. No, it's not quite that bad. We're gonna live, but you're gonna see a financial system reset, and this is why it's called the Reset Sniper. Remember, subscribe and like. What are you doing sitting there? Why haven't you done that yet? God damn it, get on with it. Okay, so you're going to hear more about the student loan, and I'm going to wrap this one up, but here's the key bits. The debt to GDP ratio is, here you're going to have a large part of your future family formation. So these are your future guys that are going to be renting properties, getting married, having kids, buying furniture. Now they've all got impaired credit. Now they can't consume. They can't consume in the same scale. They ain't going to be buying second-hand cars. They ain't going to be buying their first microwave, their furniture for their apartment or anything. They all moved in with their mom, and they still can't pay their loans, and they're working as pizza delivery boys with a degree in astrophysics. That's where you're at. And they're earning minimum wage. So their career prospects are crap. They've got damaged credit. They've gone through the whole system of trying to pay less and stretch it out and roll up more and longer term. And the other aspect here is that the penalties compound and add virtually 50% when you start going arrears on the original 100 grand. So you could owe 100 grand, but by the time you're done going through the whole system and penalized and late payments and you didn't do this and penalty upon penalty, this just racks up to, you could be 150 grand in the hole on 100 grand overall initial debt, which rolled up on accommodation, tuition fees, it's XYZ, college, where you were brainwashed about leftism and socialism and why you should have UBI. And I see a link here for UBI because it'll kind of be a way of how they can get UBI in so that people can get a bit of basic income to pay back their debt. The money will give them money only to take it all back. Again, so these ideas are being pushed very strongly in a radical thinking of academia. Yes, indeed. So what's happening on the debt to GDP ratio? So you're going to get hit both on the debt side. So if you think of a fraction, the numerator and the denominator, you're going to hit on both sides because you're not going to get growth because the people that are supposed to be providing the growth, the expenditure years, the home and family formation years, coming out of college, getting into cars, getting into homes, renting homes, buying furniture, setting up for life, accumulating stuff, having babies, accumulating more stuff for babies, etc. That can't happen because people don't have the money in the credit store. So they put off having families. So of course it's a great form of population control as well. You keep people as indebted slaves. It's not, well, what a lovely environment, life is good, let's go start a 3-kid family. It's just not going to happen, not intentionally anyway. So the growth goes down, it falls a lot lower, and then all this debt that's being created that has to be recognized goes onto the debt number. So your growth, GDP, goes down and slows immensely. Your debt is spiking, and the arrears that have to be acknowledged is going parabolic. on the downside. Your debt to GDP ratio absolutely accelerates and explodes. So you're already well through the 105 mark, heading for 115 you're in the Autobahn, baby, in the Porsche Turbo, in the called debt GDP ratio, and you've got all four wheels pulling faster and faster, and there's a concrete wall waiting at the end, and you're going to be a mashed mosquito when you get there. And this is what's coming. So the only thing that should be done by either politics is reduced amount of loan grants. It isn't happening. Better financial counseling and financial education. They'll never do that. They don't want you to be financially wise. They want you to be. The whole game of the control structure is to get you on the wrong side of a compound interest equation, then own you, and then tell you on what basis your loans get forgiven and how you've got to perform and how you should want UBI and apply for this and do that, etc., etc. So better loan underwriting is another example of what neither the Republicans or the Democrats, because they're both interested in indebtedness. One wants to indebt you via the military-industrial complex. The other wants to indebt you via socialized spending. But they're both going to lead. They're both going to say, okay, you can have yours if we have ours, and they both pass both of their agendas, and ends up happening. The debt just spirals on a bipartisan way. So that's student loans. Now, by the way, for those of you that think, oh, but you can declare bankruptcy. So if you go to Chapter 7, which is bankruptcy in the States, they will tell you it's pretty hard on student loans, but it is doable. It's a myth that you can't declare bankruptcy with student loans, but you've got to remember it is the government that's the final debtor, so they ain't going to make it easier. Usually bankruptcy cuts out tax payments. Isn't that clever? Doesn't that tell you everything you need to know about the control structure? You can be drowning in debts, but the one debt that never gets written off is debt you owe to a government in tax payments. Well, in bankruptcy, it's in the US, Chapter 7, at the moment, 32% of bankruptcy is being led by student loan debt. So over a third of it is being led of which the total debt that is pushing it, 50% of that, the bulk of it is student loan debt. So it's not the car and the credit card that's gone on. It's not buying Blarnix for the ladies and lads buying gamer stations. The 32% that are going hitting the wall and declaring Chapter 7 is because of, so you're talking about a third of all bankruptcies are being led by one single category of borrowing, and that's student loan debt. And of that, more than half in each instance is the actual loan that is causing the debt, the student loan debt. So 1/3 of all Chapter 7s are being driven by student loan debt, and more than half of that owed debt, because they'll also have maxed their credit cards, they'll have maxed everything out, but the actual money amount, more than half is the student loan. So you're talking about a serious crisis. We haven't touched on subprime cars or anything else. This alone is more scaled than the high yield mortgage market was in the subprime crash. And the defaults overall for all home loans and all student loans are 3 times higher in the student loans and growing substantially quicker. And you have the least financially educated, least mature market, least earning prospect loanee that is at the other end of that compound equation. Tell me how that ends well. Anyway, so by the way, like and subscribe if you want to find out how you can really power out of the reset with us. Book a call. We are trading how to position in terms of debt. In other words, debt will be able to be shorted, even high yield debt. We did look at high yield debt, and for now, with all the pump and the repo market, believe you or not, it's actually going up in value. Why? Because it's got a high yield, but that day will come where it ends. So you can trade some of this insane fundamental facts, and you can be able to short it come the time that crashes. Technically, you need a method. The way you'll find out, book in for our mini series below in the links, or book in for a chat if you think you want to find out more about our trading methodology. That is student loans. I'm Francis. This is the Reset Sniper. Catch you again soon. And to all of you on the Reset Sniper channel, thanks for following. Thanks for watching. Merry peaceful time with your families, and have a great year in. Think about your goals. think about how you're going to be doing different things towards building your financial wealth in these reset times. Believe you me, there's a couple of years more, maybe even just 6 months, maybe a year, maybe two, fiddling time before the tables are set and you stand where you are when the Titanic hits that iceberg. How you set. Are you in one of the lifeboats with a fried chicken and a nice seat to watch the whole show, or are you right at in the middle of the ship waiting to go down in that ice water? Make sure you think carefully about that. Okay, speak to you all soon. Thanks for watching.